The air in the private hangar was cold. Not just winter morning cold, but that sterile pressurized chill that only exists around high-performance engines and leather-bound cabins. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. Not because of the temperature, though. They were shaking because of the invitation tucked into my coat pocket, a piece of cardstock so thick and expensive it felt like a weapon. "Mom, why is it so loud in here?" Leo's voice pulled me back. I looked down at my 6-year-old son, his small hand gripping mine, and then at Maya, his twin sister, who was busy trying to lace up a shoe that had definitely seen better days. They were wearing their Sunday best, which, let's be honest, was just the only outfit I'd managed to keep the stains off of. "It's just the wind, sweetie," I lied. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of a Gulf Stream G650 warming up. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Just 3 years ago, I was scrubbing floors in a diner in Ohio, wondering if I could afford the generic brand of milk. And now I was standing on the edge of a world I didn't belong to, preparing to fly halfway across the world to watch the man who broke me say, "I do" to someone else. Julian. My ex-husband. The man who told me I was a weight around his neck when he finally made his first million. The man who hadn't seen these children, his children, since they were in diapers. He hadn't sent a dime. Not a birthday card. Not a phone call. Until last month. The invitation hadn't come with an apology. It came with a smirk I could practically feel through the paper. He wanted me there. He wanted the poor, struggling ex-wife to sit in the back row of his destination wedding in Lake Como. He wanted to show me exactly what I'd missed out on. He wanted to rub his billion-dollar empire in my face while I wore a dress from a thrift store. But Julian didn't know everything. He thought he'd left me in the dirt. He didn't realize that when you're left in the dirt, sometimes you find something buried there. "Is that our plane, Mama?" Maya asked, pointing at the sleek, matte black jet. I looked at the man standing near the boarding stairs. Elias. He wasn't the groom. He wasn't my ex. He was something else entirely. A man who had seen me at my lowest and decided I was worth more than gold. He adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes meeting mine with a steady, grounding heat. "It's not just a plane, Maya," Elias said, his voice a low rumble that always made me feel safe. He stepped toward us, ignoring the grease and the noise of the hangar. "It's the beginning of the truth." He reached out, offering his hand to me. I looked at it, then back at the kids. If I got on that plane, there was no going back. The poor ex-wife would officially be dead. The woman who arrived in Italy would be someone Julian wouldn't even recognize. But as I took Elias's hand and felt the cool metal of the jet stairs beneath my feet, I felt a sickening realization. I wasn't just going there for closure. I was going there for war. And in war, people get hurt. I looked at the invitation one last time before dropping it into a trash bin by the door. "Julian Vance and Clara Sterling request the honor of your presence." "You have no idea what's coming for you, Julian," I whispered. The engines roared to a deafening scream, drowning out my voice, and as the cabin door sealed shut, the pressure in my chest finally snapped. We were airborne. We were moving toward a confrontation that would either set me free or destroy the life I'd spent 3 years building from the ashes. But as we leveled off at 30,000 feet, I looked out the window and saw my own reflection. I didn't look like a waitress anymore. I looked like a storm. And storms don't care about weddings. As I settled into the buttery leather seat, Elias handed me a folder. I opened it expecting flight details. Instead, my breath hitched. Inside were photos, not of the wedding but of Julian. And he wasn't alone. He was standing with a man I recognized from my darkest nightmares. The wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was a cover for something that could put us all in a grave. "Elias," I gasped, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me he was working with them?" Elias didn't look away from the window. "Because, Sarah, I needed you to want to go for your own reasons first. Now you're going for mine." The climb to 30,000 feet felt like leaving the earth behind, but my mind was stuck 3 years in the past. I closed my eyes and suddenly I was back in that cramped, grey apartment. The smell of burnt toast and desperation. Julian had stood there in a suit that cost more than our car, tossing a stack of papers on the laminate table. "Sign them, Sarah. It's over," he'd said. No emotion. No "I'm sorry." Just a cold, calculated exit. He told me I was a relic of his broke years, a reminder of a life he wanted to bury. He didn't even look at the twins' cribs. He walked out, and for a year I survived on prayer and double shifts. I was the poor ex-wife the neighbors whispered about. "Mom, are you okay?" Maya's voice broke the memory. She was leaning over the armrest, her eyes wide as she looked at the crystal glass of sparkling water Elias had set down. "I'm okay, baby," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I turned to Elias. "How long have you known Julian was connected to the Sterling Group? That's his fiancée's family, isn't it?" Elias leaned back, his silhouette sharp against the clouds outside the window. "Clara Sterling isn't just his fiancée, Sarah. She's his ticket into a circle that doesn't let people like Julian in. But he's playing a dangerous game. He's using your children's inheritance, the trust his own father set up before he passed, to fund the Sterling's failing shipping empire." My heart stopped. Julian's father, a man who had loved me like his own daughter, had left a safety net for Leo and Maya. I thought Julian had burned it. I thought it was gone. "He's stealing from them," I whispered. "He thinks he's borrowing it," Elias corrected. "But the wedding, it's a legal maneuver. Once he marries into that family, the paperwork becomes a labyrinth. You'll never touch that money, and your kids will grow up with nothing while he plays billionaire." I looked at the kids, now fast asleep under cashmere blankets. Julian didn't just break my heart. He was trying to steal their future. The pain that had been a dull ache for years sharpened into a blade. "We land in Milan in 6 hours, Elias said softly. "The car is waiting. The villa is ready. You aren't going there to beg, Sarah. You're going there to collect." As the sun began to set over the Atlantic, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. I was cold. A deep, tectonic cold that comes when you realize the person you loved was never really a person at all, just a predator in a nice suit. We touched down in the dark. As the hangar doors opened in Milan, a black SUV pulled up, but it wasn't ours. A man stepped out, holding a camera and a phone. He looked at me, then at the jet, then back at his screen. "Sarah," he called out. "Julian sent me. He said to make sure the charity case got to the hotel safely." He sneered, pointing the camera right at my face. The flash of the camera felt like a slap. I didn't flinch. I watched the man, some bottom-tier PR lackey Julian had hired to humiliate me, smirk as he adjusted his lens. He expected me to hide my face. He expected me to look like the woman who cried in the courthouse hallway 3 years ago. "Did you get the shot?" I asked, my voice as steady as the mountain range in the distance. The man blinked. "What? The shot?" I repeated, stepping off the last stair. I wasn't wearing my old coat anymore. I had draped a tailored wool wrap over my shoulders. "Make sure you get my good side. Julian's paying you for the poor ex-wife narrative, right? Make sure he gets his money's worth." Elias stepped out behind me, his presence looming like a shadow. He didn't say a word, but the cameraman's smirk vanished the moment he saw the security detail moving in behind us. "Get in the car," Elias whispered to me. The drive to Lake Como was a blur of winding roads and moonlight reflecting off the water. We didn't go to the budget hotel Julian had booked for me. We didn't even go to the main wedding resort. Instead, the SUV climbed higher, winding up a private road until we reached a gate guarded by 2 men in black. "Where are we?" asked. "Villa del Sogno," Elias replied. "It overlooks the Sterling estate. You can see their entire wedding setup from the balcony. It's owned by a friend. Or rather, a business rival of Julian's who would love nothing more than to see him fall." The villa was a masterpiece of stone and glass. As I walked through the doors, holding the twins' hands, I saw the staff lined up. They bowed. Me. The girl from the diner. "Your rooms are ready, Signora," a woman said softly. I spent the night staring out at the lights across the lake. Down there, Julian was probably having his rehearsal dinner. He was probably laughing, telling stories about his crazy ex, who was so desperate she accepted a free flight to his wedding. He thought he was the director of this play. He didn't realize I'd rewritten the ending. The next morning, the invitation arrived at our door. Not the paper one. Text from Julian. "Hope the flight wasn't too bumpy in coach, Sarah. The kids can stay with the nanny tomorrow during the ceremony. I don't want them making a scene in the photos. See you at the altar." I looked at the message, then at the dress Elias had delivered to my room. It wasn't white. It wasn't black. It was a deep, blood-red silk that looked like a warning. "Leo, Maya," I called out. The twins ran into the room, jumping on the massive bed. "Today we're going to see your father. But I want you to remember something. No matter what he says or how big his house is, you are the ones with the power. Do you understand?" Leo looked at me, his eyes wise beyond his years. "Is he a bad man, Mommy?" I knelt down, tucking a strand of hair behind his ear. "He's a man who forgot what's important." The wedding ceremony was set to begin at sunset. As we pulled up to the Sterling estate in a fleet of 3 black cars, the security guard tried to stop us. "The guest entrance is around the back for the special invites," he said, looking at his clipboard. I rolled down the window, wearing oversized dark glasses. "Tell Julian that his business partners are here," I said. "And tell him I brought the witnesses." The Sterling estate was a sea of white roses and arrogance. Celebrities, politicians, and the old money elite moved across the lawn like slow-motion ghosts. When I stepped out of the car, the air seemed to go still. The red of my dress was a wound in a world of white. I didn't head for the back. I walked straight down the center aisle, Maya and Leo on either side of me. People started to whisper. "Is that her? I thought he said she was a waitress." Julian was standing at the front, adjusting his tie near a flower-covered arch. He looked up, a smug grin already forming on his face, the look of a man who thought he'd won. But as I got closer, as the sunlight hit the diamonds Elias had insisted I wear, his grin faltered, then it vanished. He looked at me. Then he looked at the twins. His eyes went wide, not with love, but with pure, unadulterated terror. He saw the way people were looking at us. He saw that I didn't look broken. I looked like I owned the lake. "Sarah!" he hissed as I reached the front row. "What the hell are you doing? And why are you dressed like that? Go to the back. Now." "The back is for people who are afraid, Julian," I said, my voice carrying just enough for the surrounding rows to hear. "I'm not afraid anymore. And the kids, they wanted to see their father. It's been 3 years. Surely you have a moment for them before you commit your life to someone else's bank account." "Get them out of here," Julian whispered, his face turning a mottled red. "You're ruining this. Clara is about to walk out." "Then let her walk," I said, stepping closer. I lowered my voice so only he could hear. "I saw the photos, Julian. I know about the Sterling shipping fraud. I know about the trust fund you've been draining. And more importantly, Elias knows." The name Elias hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back an inch, his eyes darting to the back of the crowd where Elias stood, arms crossed, watching the scene like a hunter. "You wouldn't," Julian breathed. "You'd destroy yourself too. You'd lose everything." "I've already lost everything once, Julian. That's my superpower. You've never even been hungry. You don't know how to survive a fall. But you're about to learn." The music started, the traditional wedding march. The crowd rose. Clara Sterling appeared at the top of the stone steps, a vision in lace and lies. She started her walk, a triumphant smile on her face. She didn't see me yet. She only saw the man she thought was her golden ticket. I sat down in the very front row, right next to Julian's mother, a woman who had ignored my calls for years. I smiled at her. She looked like she wanted to faint. "Beautiful day for a wedding, isn't it?" I whispered to her. As Clara reached the altar, she finally saw us. She stopped dead. Her bouquet trembled. She looked at Julian, then at me, then at the two children who looked exactly like the man she was about to marry. The officiant cleared his throat. "We are gathered here today." "Wait," I said. It wasn't a shout. It was just a calm, clear word that cut through the silence like a bell. The entire garden went silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Clara looked like she was going to scream. Julian looked like he was going to vomit. "I think before we continue," I said, standing up slowly, "we should talk about the guests who weren't invited. The ones who are standing at the gates right now with the Italian authorities." Julian's face went from red to a ghostly, translucent white. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm, his fingers digging in. "You're bluffing," he hissed. But at that exact moment, the heavy iron gates at the entrance of the estate groaned open. 4 dark sedans roared up the driveway, sirens silent but lights flashing. Clara looked at the cars, then at Julian. "Julian, what is this? Who are they?" I pulled my arm back, smoothed my dress, and looked him dead in the eye. "They aren't here for the cake, Julian. They're here for the thief." "Sarah, stop this," Julian hissed, his voice cracking. "You're making a mistake. You're destroying the kids' lives. If I go down, they get nothing. Is that what you want? To go back to that diner?" I looked at Leo and Maya. They weren't crying. They were standing tall, watching their father crumble. They didn't see a hero. They saw a man who was afraid of the truth. "They already had nothing, Julian," I said, my voice low and lethal. "They had a father who forgot they existed. That's a poverty no amount of money can fix." The lead officer approached the altar. He didn't look at the flowers or the distraught bride. He looked straight at Julian. "Julian Vance. You're under investigation for international wire fraud and the embezzlement of trust assets. You'll need to come with us." Clara screamed. It wasn't a scream of heartbreak. It was the scream of a woman who realized her billionaire groom was actually a liability. She ripped her hand away from his, her lace sleeve tearing in the process. "Julian, what is he talking about?" "My father's shipping company. You said the investment was cleared." "It was," Julian yelled, turning to her. "Clara, she's lying. This is a setup." I stepped forward, pulling a small digital tablet from my clutch, the one Elias had prepared for me. I turned the screen toward the crowd, toward the cameras Julian had hired to document his triumph. "It's all here," I said. "The shell companies, the forged signatures on his father's estate papers, and the offshore accounts in the Sterling family name. He didn't just steal from his children, Clara. He used your family's name to launder the money. He didn't marry you for love. He married you for a shield." The silence that followed was deafening. Julian looked at the screen, then at the police. He tried to run, a desperate, clumsy sprint toward the lake, but Elias's men were already there. They didn't even have to touch him. He tripped on the hem of a decorative rug and fell face-first into the grass. The king of the hill was face down in the dirt. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at me. The smugness was gone. The arrogance was gone. There was only a hollow, pathetic shell of a man. "I'll hate you forever for this," he spat. "I don't care, Julian," I replied, tucking the tablet away. "I stopped thinking about what you felt 3 years ago. Today, I'm only thinking about what they deserve." I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Elias." He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes told me everything. The first strike was over. But the war for the twins' future had only just begun. As the police cars pulled away, Clara's father, the patriarch of the Sterling Empire, stepped toward me. He didn't look angry. He looked terrified. "You have the original ledgers," he whispered, his face ashen. "If those go to the press, my family is finished. What do you want, Sarah?" I looked at Mr. Sterling. This was the man who had bankrolled Julian's rise, the man who had looked down his nose at me when I first arrived at the gates. Now he was bartering for his life. "I don't want your money, Mr. Sterling," I said, the silk of my red dress catching the evening breeze. "I want the truth. And I want the legal rights to the Vance estate returned to the rightful heirs. Every cent Julian funneled into your ships. That would bankrupt us," Clara shouted, her veil hanging crookedly off her head. "Then I guess you'll learn what it feels like to start over," I said. "It's not as scary as it looks. You just have to get used to the smell of cheap soap and the sound of debt collectors calling." I turned my back on them. I took the kids' hands and walked back toward our cars. We didn't stay for the reception. We didn't stay to watch the Sterlings scramble to save their reputation. We drove back to our villa in silence. The twins fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the drama they didn't fully understand. When we arrived, Elias walked me to the balcony overlooking the dark water. "You handled that better than I expected," he said, handing me a glass of water. "I didn't do it for the theater, Elias," I said, looking out at the lights. "I did it because for 3 years I felt like a ghost. I felt like I didn't exist because I didn't have a bank account that mattered. Tonight I realized that Julian was the ghost. He was nothing but a suit and a set of lies." "He's going to fight from prison," Elias warned. "He still has allies. People who don't want those ledgers seeing the light of day. Let them come," I said. "I've spent 3 years surviving on nothing. They've spent 30 years relying on everything. I know who wins that fight." But as the night grew cold, I felt a shiver. It wasn't fear. It was a realization. The billionaire's jet we arrived in wasn't mine. The villa wasn't mine. I was still a woman with no home and a precarious future. Elias had helped me, but I knew in this world nothing was truly free. "Why are you really doing this, Elias?" I asked, turning to him. "You've spent millions to help a woman you barely know destroy a man who was barely a threat to you. What's the catch?" Elias looked at me, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. He stepped closer until I could feel the heat radiating from him. "The catch, Sarah, is that Julian didn't just steal from his father. He stole something from mine. And you were the only person with the legal standing to open the doors I needed opened. We're partners whether you like it or not." My heart skipped a beat. Partnership. It sounded like a lifeline, but as I looked at the folder Elias was still holding, I saw a name I hadn't noticed before. A name scrawled on the bottom of a contract. My own signature, dated 2 years ago. A signature I never made. "Elias," I whispered, the world tilting. "I never signed this. Who forged my name?" The air on the balcony turned ice cold. I stared at the paper in Elias's hand. It was a power of attorney, giving a third party full control over my legal claims to the Vance estate. My signature was there, perfect, flowing, and completely fake. "I thought you found this in the Sterling files," I said, my voice trembling. Elias didn't blink. "I did. But I didn't find it in Julian's office. I found it in the safe of the man who's been protecting you for the last 3 years. Your lawyer in Ohio. Mr. Henderson." The world felt like it was dissolving. Henderson. The kindly old man who had handled my divorce pro bono. The man who told me there was no money left, and that I should just move on. "He's been working with Julian the whole time." "Breathe." "Worse," Elias said. "He was working for the people who were using Julian. Julian was just a distraction, Sarah. A loud, arrogant distraction to keep your eyes off the real theft. They didn't just want the millions. They wanted the land the Vance factories sit on. Land that, according to your father-in-law's secret will, belongs entirely to you." I sat down hard in a wrought iron chair. The poor ex-wife narrative wasn't just a result of Julian's cruelty. It was a coordinated effort to keep me in the dark. If I had known I was a landowner, I would have had the power to stop the Sterling Group years ago. So this whole trip, the wedding, the arrest, it was all to get Henderson to panic? Yes. "Exactly," Elias replied. And it worked. He just tried to move $10 million out of a hidden account. We traced the transaction 10 minutes ago. I looked at my hands again. They weren't shaking anymore. They were clenched into fists. I had been a pawn in a game I didn't even know was being played. Julian, the Sterlings, Henderson. They all looked at me and saw a girl they could push around. They saw a charity case. What's the next move? Yes. We go back to Ohio, Elias said. But we don't go back to the diner. We go to the firm. We walk in there and we take back what's yours. No, I said, standing up. We don't just take it back. We burn the firm down. Legally speaking. The next morning we boarded the black jet again. But this time I wasn't looking at the luxury with awe. I was looking at it as a tool. I spent the flight studying the documents Elias provided. I learned about the Vance Trust and the land rights. I learned that I was technically one of the wealthiest women in the state, and I'd been skipping meals to buy diapers. The rage was a quiet, steady hum in my blood. When we touched down in the gray, rainy outskirts of my hometown, I didn't feel like I was returning home. I felt like an invader. We pulled up to the brick office of Henderson and Associates. I didn't wait for Elias to open the door. I walked in, the red dress from the wedding now replaced by a sharp midnight blue suit. The receptionist looked up, her jaw dropping. Sarah, we heard you were away, she stammered. Is he in? Asked, my voice like a razor. He's in a meeting, but I didn't listen. I kicked the double doors to the conference room open. Henderson was sitting there, his spectacles perched on his nose, looking every bit the kindly old man. He looked up and for a split second I saw it. The flicker of absolute, soul-crushing terror. Sarah, he said, his voice wobbling. What a surprise. I heard things got complicated in Italy. Complicated isn't the word, George, I said, leaning over the table. The word is criminal. And I think it's time we discussed my signature. Henderson tried to reach for a phone, but I slammed my hand down on his desk. Don't bother, I said. The police aren't coming for me, George. But they are downstairs. And they have the wire transfer records from Milan. George's face went gray. He looked past me at Elias, who was standing in the doorway. Then he looked at the fireplace in the corner of the room, where a pile of shredded papers was still smoldering. You're too late, he whispered with a haunting smile. The deeds are gone, Sarah. Without the physical copies, you're still just a girl from a diner. The physical deeds, Sarah, George repeated, his voice regaining its oily composure. The Vance estate was built on old-world rules. My father and Julian's father. They didn't trust digital clouds. They trusted paper. And right now, those papers are ash. I looked at the fireplace. The orange glow was fading, leaving only charred flakes of what used to be my children's future. I felt a hollow pit open in my stomach. 3 years of struggle, the flight to Italy, the confrontation at the altar. Was it all going to end because of a matchstick? Elias stepped into the room, his presence cold and mechanical. He didn't look at the fire. He looked at George. You think you're the only one who knows how the old man thought, George? George's smile faltered. What are you talking about? Julian's father was a paranoid man, Elias said, walking toward the bookshelf. He knew Julian was weak. He knew the Sterlings were vultures. And he certainly knew that a small-town lawyer like you could be bought for the right price. Elias reached behind a leather-bound set of encyclopedias and pulled out a small, heavy iron box. It wasn't hidden behind a painting or a safe. It was sitting in plain sight. That's just a decorative piece, George stammered, his face turning the color of old parchment. No, I said, realizing it at the same moment. I remembered Julian's father, Arthur. He used to tell me, Sarah, the best place to hide a secret is where everyone assumes it's garbage. Elias set the box on the table. It didn't have a keyhole. It had a fingerprint scanner. Primitive but effective. The deeds in the fireplace were the fakes, George, I said, my voice gaining strength. You were so busy protecting the forgeries you'd been using to drain the accounts that you forgot Arthur Vance never gave you the originals. He gave them to me 2 weeks before he died. I placed my thumb on the scanner. A soft click echoed in the silent room. The lid popped open. Inside weren't just the deeds to the Vance factories. There was a letter and a flash drive. I looked at George. He knew you'd turn on me. He knew Julian would leave. This box was set to be activated only when my biometric data was registered at a high-stress level near this office. The GPS in the jet, the sensors in the villa. Elias wasn't just my benefactor. He was the executor of a will you never saw. George sank into his chair. The kindly old man was gone. In his place was a broken, terrified criminal. I had no choice, he whispered. The Sterlings. They threatened my family. You always have a choice, George, I said, picking up the iron box. You chose the money. Now, you can choose which prison you'd like to spend the rest of your life in. As the police led George out in zip ties, Elias handed me the flash drive. There's one more thing in here, Sarah. Something Arthur didn't even tell me. It's the reason Julian was so desperate to get you to that wedding. It wasn't about the money. It was about a person. We sat in a quiet park across from the law firm. Leo and Maya were playing on the swings, their laughter a sharp contrast to the weight of the drive in my hand. Elias sat next to me on the bench, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Open it, he said. I plugged the drive into my laptop. A single video file appeared. Click play. The screen flickered to life, showing Arthur Vance sitting in a hospital bed, looking frail but sharp. Sarah, his voice crackled. If you're seeing this, it means the world has tried to break you, and you didn't let it. I'm sorry for the son I raised. Julian has a hole in his soul where his conscience should be. He took a shaky breath. The Sterlings aren't just business rivals, Sarah. They're family. Julian's biological mother didn't die in a car crash like I told him. She was a Sterling. My marriage to her was a merger that went wrong. She left him when he was a baby to go back to her empire. Julian didn't want to marry Clara because of her money. He wanted to marry her because she's his half-sister's daughter. He was trying to buy back the family that rejected him by selling out the family that loved him. I gasped, covering my mouth. The wedding wasn't just a fraud. It was a twisted attempt at reclamation. Julian was trying to crawl back into a lineage that had discarded him, and he was willing to sacrifice his own children to do it. The land, Sarah. It's not just dirt, Arthur continued on the screen. Underneath those factories is the largest lithium deposit in the Midwest. It's worth billions. And it belongs to the twins. Keep them safe. Don't let the name Vance be a curse. The video cut to black. I looked at Elias. He knew. He'd known about the lithium. That's why he'd invested so much in me. Is that all I am to you, Elias? I asked, the old bitterness creeping back in. A mining claim. Elias turned to me, and for the first time the mask slipped. There was pain in his eyes, real human pain. My father died in one of those factories, Sarah. Julian's mother, the Sterlings. They cut corners on safety to boost the merger value. I didn't want the lithium. I wanted the people who killed my father to lose everything. I used you, yes, but I also saw myself in you. Someone the world decided was disposable. He stood up, looking at the kids on the swings. The deeds are yours. The lithium rights are yours. You're the wealthiest woman in this state now. You don't need me anymore. He started to walk away, his silhouette disappearing into the late afternoon shadows. Elias called out. He stopped but didn't turn around. The poor ex-wife is gone, I said. But the woman who survived, she's still here. And she doesn't want to build an empire alone. Elias paused, his shoulders tense. He began to turn back when a black car screeched to a halt at the edge of the park. The door flew open and a woman stepped out. She wasn't a lawyer or a cop. She was older, dressed in a sharp white suit, and she looked exactly like a cold, regal version of Julian. "So," she said, her voice like ice. "You're the girl who ruined my son. I'm Catherine Sterling. And I've come to take what belongs to my bloodline." Catherine Sterling walked toward us with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Behind her, two large men in suits trailed like shadows. She didn't look at the playground. She didn't look at the beautiful day. She looked at me as if I were a bug on her windshield. "The deeds you found are useless, Sarah," she said, stopping a few feet away. "My lawyers have already filed an injunction. Arthur was not in his right mind when he signed those papers. We'll spend the next 20 years in court. By the time I'm done, your children will be middle-aged and broke." I felt the old familiar fear try to rise, but then I looked at Leo and Maya. They had stopped swinging. They were watching. I didn't back down. I stepped toward her. "You're Catherine, the woman who walked away from her own son because he didn't fit the brand." "I did what was necessary for the empire," she snapped. "Well, I'm doing what's necessary for my family," I said. "You want to fight in court for 20 years. Fine. But while we're doing that, I'll be releasing the footage of your son's arrest to every major news outlet in Europe and America. I'll be sharing the documents showing how the Sterling Group used Julian to launder money. Your brand will be synonymous with traitor and thief before the first hearing ends." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't dare. You'd destroy the Vance name too." "The Vance name is already dirt, Catherine. I'm not a Vance anymore. I'm Sarah. Just Sarah. And I have nothing left to lose, because I've already lived through the worst thing you can do to a person. Being forgotten." Elias stepped up beside me. "And she's not alone, Catherine. My firm holds the debt on your shipping fleet. One phone call and I call in the notes. You'll be bankrupt by Monday morning." The silence in the park was absolute. For the first time, the great Catherine Sterling looked small. She looked at me, then at Elias, then at the children. She realized she wasn't dealing with a poor ex-wife. She was dealing with a force of nature. "What do you want?" she hissed. "I want a full, irrevocable release of all claims to the Vance estate," I said. "I want a public apology to my children for the years of neglect. And then I want you to get in that car, go back to your ivory tower and never ever look in our direction again." She stared at me for a long time, her face a mask of fury. Finally, she turned to one of her men. "Give her the papers. We're done here." As the black car drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the grass. I turned to Elias. "Is it over?" "It's just beginning," he said, but this time he was smiling. I walked over to the swings and scooped Leo and Maya into my arms. We weren't the poor family anymore. We weren't the abandoned ones. We were the ones who stayed. We were the ones who fought. Life isn't about the jet you arrive in or the red dress you wear to a wedding. It's about the strength you find when the world expects you to crawl. Julian thought he was inviting me to his triumph. He didn't realize he was inviting me to my own coronation. I looked up at the sky, feeling the warmth of the evening air. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running from the past. I was walking toward the future. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.